until January. So Aquarian is going to stay with the billing until January. Suez is going to transfer over to their own billing system in January. But as of right now, all the account numbers for Aquarian have been transferred to an account number for Ware River. And Aquarian is going to continue to bill. That's why on the website it says if you have questions to call Aquarian regarding the billing. So Aquarian is going to remain billing for right now.
What about January?
January, Suez has their own billing system coming in.
Okay, well, we'll want to work with you. Probably Brenda can work with you, Russell, or someone else at Suez to talk about that, because it's going to be an important for us, because we rely upon information from you to issue our sewer bills. For
Absolutely.
Acid.
Yep. Absolutely. And as soon as I get off the phone with you, if no one from Suez could have made the call, I'll talk to those guys and make sure they know the importance of it. But like I said, nothing's changing on that end right now. So.
Oh, also just to let you guys know, I did speak to Leanne, who's the new head of admin over there, who works with Suez now, and her and I had several great conversations already in regards to the transition. There's still a lot of things that are up in the air, but she came from a town that uses the same billing software as we use for water and sewer in Cohasset, and that Hingham Sewer uses and Hull Sewer uses. So it's my hopes that we use the same billing software for an easier transition, but we'll see what happens.
So if you already talked to Leanne, I might as well hang up because she knows way more than I do. That's good. You had a conversation with her. No, it is. It's good. Leanne's great. She really is great.
She even was asking about purchasing of meters and whatnot like that, because now that it's not Aquarian, I don't know who has a national account like Aquarian did. So I told her who the local distributor was and whatnot. We did have a really nice conversation.
Good.
Well, I'm really glad about that. Are there any other questions about the internet, that you apparently know how it works and everything?
Myself? No. I actually got the contract the other day, so I'm going to read it over myself, get familiar with it. And I haven't really read the contract itself, but I know exactly what you guys do and how you do it. I don't know the ins and outs of the contract, but I'll read that over. I'll know it before the end of the week. Is there anything you guys need from us? I guess that's the other question back right to you guys. Is there anything you need from Ware River?
I would just ask, are there any changes that you're anticipating that could have an impact on us as the Cohasset Water Commissioner, Water Department?
No, because our goal now is to make things better. So, distribution-wise, treatment-wise, we will probably do a more aggressive flushing program. So, but we'll be in contact with everybody. Like the other day, I had a problem with the phones, and I emailed. I emailed Town Hall up at Cohasset Town Hall, just to make sure that everybody was aware.
Commission meeting right now, but I forgot all about it. So I would say by 4:30. So if you want to head over after that,
Jason, you're on mute. Jason,
who's
mute
not
yourself.
muted, Mike?
No, it's Jason.
Okay.
But the question that
yep.
contract will be coming up soon with Linden Pond, and hopefully, will you people over at Ware River want to continue with the contract?
That I'll discuss with the Board of Water Commissioners. Like I said, I just started 3 weeks ago, so I know about the contract. I know what it is. I do not know what their intentions are. So I have a meeting with them, my first full meeting with them next week. So I will let them know about I'll remind them of the renewal and stuff like that. So.
Okay, and we have these meetings 4 times a year.
Okay.
And Carl,
no problem with that.
Over at Linden Ponds that we should know about that you've heard? Everything is good with their meters and everything?
Yes, sir.
Okay, don't know where that's coming from.
I mean,
Sorry, that was me. That's the radio on my truck. I'm sorry, I shut it off.
Okay.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other information we want to divulge to each other, I think we should call the interconnect meeting at an end.
All right, but if you guys need anything, I have all my information I gave to Brenda, and she has it. And if anyone else needs anything, just get a hold of me personally. And just so you know, I work for the town. I do not work for Suez. So I'm the town's representative for the water company, for the water. So Suez is a subcontractor for the town, but I work directly for the town.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Thanks.
Russ.
All right, have a nice day. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thanks, nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks. Good to meet you too. Bye.
Okay, our next order of business is Don. Don, do you want to unmute?
Hey, everybody. So I talked to Brenda this morning and let her know I don't really have the formal reports this month. The last few years, we've done an update basically in September through July and August. But I still wanted to just come on just to talk quickly about the first quarter commitment, which you guys know is up about 21%, about $205,000, which is great compared to the budget. Breaking the budget down into 4 quarters and comparing that to the first quarter, we're ahead of schedule based on the commitment versus the budget of about 160. So I'd say so far so good. We'll have a better idea. Like I said, it's sometime in September of our year-to-date through August. Really just wanted to come on, talk about the commitment, see if you guys had any other questions, and go from there.
Okay, well, no, I feel as though with that commitment, our budget does look good. And also our system development, you know, that we'll be getting hopefully a check from Stop and Shop.
Yep.
Will put us basically double what we received, at least a minimum of double what we received last year.
Sure.
And system development just for that. So we're getting off to a flying start.
I agree. Anybody else?
No. Don, do you mind staying on for the next topic? Because I think you'll have important insight on it and I think be involved.
I can. I don't know what honestly, I just knew I was second up. I didn't know what, I actually didn't look at the agenda, but I can stick around. I do have a hard stop at 4.
All right, we'll be done by then. This is quick. So Lee, is it okay if I kind of, okay. So the Woodard and Kern contract, as I think everyone knows, is 3-year contracts. It's a total of 9, but there are 3 different potential phases. When it was entered into in 2015, it was for 3 years with the option of the town to renew for another 3 years at fixed pricing. And we did that, and we are now in the second 3-year term of the contract. And we have the option to renew again. And under section 3.1 of the contract, it says that this period ends June 30th, 2021, but that we have to give at least 90 days notice in order to take advantage of the next 3 years that were negotiated. I just think, personally, I think Woodard and Kern's doing a great job. I think they're a wonderful partner. But because this was done 5 years ago, a lot may have changed. And so I just think it's important to look at the financial picture. And we may find out very well, this is a great deal. We'd be crazy not to renew again for the next 3 years. But my sense, and I'd love to hear what other people have to say, is that it may make sense to do some due diligence on this before we just renew to see, is this really still a great deal? Some things have changed. For example, we're gonna, once we get DEP approval, we will have an automated plant at least after the first shift. the plant's ready for that, but it's not, has not been approved by DEP, I think because of the coronavirus and delays. But that will be a savings that was not anticipated, I think, when the contract was entered into. At the same time, I know that all the professionals that work for Woodard and Curran are in high demand, that there's not many people with their skill sets, and therefore the cost of hiring people is becoming much greater. Under the contract, if you look at Article A112, it says that Woodard and Curran must provide the town on a quarterly basis with documentation of actual operations and maintenance expenses for all water department facilities under contractor control, and fully cooperate with the efforts of the water department, the town, with their designated agents if they choose to annually audit the financial and physical conditions of the contractor controlled facilities. And there's a similar provision requiring, this is A114, says the contractor will also be required to provide to the water department on a quarterly basis an accounting of all of its costs for providing full service operations, maintenance, and management services. So I'm wondering, Don, from your point of view, and I'd love to hear what Steve and Lee have to say, and Woodard and Curran, whether it makes sense to look at that information before renewing, and we'd have to renew by the end of February. So we have some time, but not a lot if we decide we need to do another RFP. The cost goes up in the next 3-year term to $942,519 a year, which again may be a super great deal. I just don't know. So that's all I have on it. Lee or Steve, do you have any thoughts? Steve, you run a utility, you are probably better equipped to kind of focus, understand where we should go with this than I am.
So, you know, I think when you have folks in place, this is just my opinion, I think, and they've become the professional of your system, and you've entrusted them to run your system. And honestly, obviously this is my 3rd meeting, but I've been in town quite a few years. And, you know, if in your point of views, if the system has run better than the previous, then, you know, sometimes retaining those folks are your better options. You know, yeah, there might be a different company out there, but again, if people are happy and they've done a good job, which it appears they have been, you know, it's, you know, sometimes it's better, you know, using the same folks. And that's just my opinion, because you become a professional of your utility system. So, and essentially kind of what Hingham did, they retained all the employees because they are the system operators and they know the system in and out. So that's just my opinion. Obviously, you know, folks could differ, but as time goes on, you know, salaries will go up per the contract, you know, different contract years, and that's well expected, you know. Lee, what's your thoughts?
Well, you know, taking a look, it's basically, what is a $46,000 increase in the contract for the next 3 years per year, because you said it was 943. And the other piece of the puzzle here is the SCADA and the unmanned plant. I hate to say this, but this is something that's been in the works for 10 years. And it's been constantly discussed. And I remember having discussions with Paul Rue about this when Peter DiCaprio was on the board. And this was something that was projected to, I think, have happened 2 to 3 years ago, and it didn't happen yet. So they may be losing money. I don't know. I'm not sure. And with an unmanned plant, you're only talking about basically the upstairs operators. You're not talking about Brenda or the people out in the field. So we're not talking that many people. And with what's happening in the market today, to see how people are getting remunerated for their jobs, it is worth, looking at and sitting down with them and seeing what their opinion is on where we are and what they expected at this point. Fred, do you have any?
And I would add one more thing too. They should really do a salary survey, make sure they're up to par with other systems, that are either similar or same functionality in the same, kind of plant operations. Because again, you want retention of employees. That's a really, I really feel strongly about that, because retention is very key. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, because we are in a unique position because we're such a tiny system, and with our overhead costs.
Yep.
So I don't know. It is worth sitting down with Fred and possibly Paul and seeing what their thoughts are, where they thought we would be when they started the contract.
Yeah, I'd happy to do that with you and Paul and the board, Lee. My understanding, obviously being a new area manager, and I agree with you all as far as the retention of good employees and what the market brings, it's challenging. But as far as the skate upgrades that was completed in 19, and you're all aware of difficult operating season and the change in staff, some of the things that occurred over the last year and a half was a challenge in itself. And then coming into this operating season, all the alarms and the automation side of things, they have been tested. We are comfortable, we're ready. COVID kind of put a snag in everything. And once DEP gets up again and is traveling, and will come out and review our alarm system and watch us test that, until such time we're not going to be able to go fully automated. But we certainly are willing to have that discussion about what that means to the operation of the plant and any cost savings or increases associated with that. So I hope that helps. If you have any specific questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Yeah, well, I think what our idea was putting this on our agenda, thanks to John here, is just to get the discussion started early, so we're not chomping at the bit and saying, oh goodness, it's time.
I can assure you, I hear all of you, all your concerns, and I will definitely carry that message back to Paul Rue and the rest of my team. And we can start those discussions whenever best suits you. Obviously, we would talk in February, but if you want to begin prior to that, that would be fine too.
Yeah, well, we want to make sure all of us come to a mutual agreement and everybody's happy. John, do you have anything else?
I don't. I think that was extremely helpful. I just felt it made sense to raise it early so that we could have any discussions that might be important. I completely agree with you, Lee, and Steve, everything you've said. I personally think Woodard and Kern's been a great partner. They've done a great job. I was not around. Lee was when it was a different operator of the plant. So Lee has more experience with that. I've only been a commissioner when Woodard and Kern's been there. So I can't compare it, but I think they've done a tremendous job. So I'm not in any way bringing this up because of performance. It's been 5 years, and the financial aspect of things changed that we might want to look at. That's the only reason I raise it. And also because we want to calendar this so that we make sure, should we decide, which it sounds like we probably will, to renew for another 3 years, that we don't miss that deadline of doing so.
Agreed, John.
I do have one quick question about that section that you talked about, Woodard and Kern documenting actual expenses per quarter. What expenses would they document? Is it essentially their payroll expenses that they're actually incurring, comparing that to what our contract is? Or, to be honest, since I've been here, I actually haven't seen the quarterly report.
That's what the contract calls for. It was in the RFP. So my reading of it, it calls for all expenses, including payroll expenses, to run the plant. That's how I read it. And, Woodard and Kern may have a different view of it, but it's a very broad statement as it was drafted, to include all expenses to operate the plant.
Yeah, this-
Okay. I was just curious because we have so many expenses that we run through, obviously, our accounting system through, the town of Cohasset Water Department that aren't necessarily flowing through Woodard and Curran themselves, where that's where I was just kind of curious on the clarification of what expenses they'd be reporting to us. So for instance, I know in the sewer department, we have part of the contractors that, Woodard and Curran, I think they take care of a certain threshold of normal maintenance within the plant. And then there's a true up at the end of the year. They budget X number of dollars in their contract for maintenance or certain items. The actual items are escaping me right now, but
that's a good-
essentially each year they run reports, show us what they actually expended. And then if it went over that 80,000 or whatever that number was, we'd have to cut them a check. If not, then it kind of, either we get a credit, I forget how it works, but so that's what I was initially picturing, but I'd be interested to know what that is.
What it says is, and I can email you down the contract, this is section A.1.14 and A.1.13. And it says very broadly, the contractor on a quarterly basis shall provide, quote, an accounting of all of its costs for providing full service operations, maintenance, and management services. So it says all expenses, all costs. So it's not limiting it to the costs that we pay directly as the water department.
Yeah, and he
Okay.
made a good point. Typical, like the wastewater project is set up with routine and non-routine maintenance accounts. So like he had said, it could be 20,000 for routine, 30,000 for non-routine. And that's all part of the billing. It's built in to the monthly cost. And if we didn't spend it all, you would get a check from Woodard. Or if we had spent more, we would seek permission prior to doing so, but then we would ask, the board for additional funds. So I'm not sure if that language references that setup. I'll have to go back to Paul Rue and get back to you all regarding the intent of that.
Okay, thank you, Fred.
All right, so maybe we could put it on the agenda for next month again.
Yep.
To discuss the expenses and see where we are. Okay, thank you, Don. If you want to,
All right, I gotta run. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
all right, Carl, do you want to discuss water restrictions?
Water restrictions, right now, we need 1.7 inches of rain by the end of the month to avoid going to the next step with water restrictions, which would be odd, even watering, mandatory.
Yeah.
So it looks to me pretty much like, that's what's going to happen, that we'll be mandatory restrictions September 1st, or we'll be initiating them at that point.
But that's not really going to greatly impact us since it's going to be September. And isn't that when we really cut back in use?
Well, after Labor Day, there's a drop certainly, and then mid-October is when we see a big increase after Columbus Day. But we're looking at, once again, mandatory restrictions, odd even watering, and do the same as we did back in 2016, no use on Sundays. And if we continue in the drought, we'd be looking at a full ban by the end of September. It's all weather dependent.
And when I drive around, I'm seeing many towns, it seems like, are already in a full ban. So I think,
Most permits are different from ours. Where we were fortunate that they made Cohasset an exception back in 2016 when the permit was renewed, that they allowed us to continue with our drought management plan that was established, I think, in 2004. So yes, most towns are in full bans at this point.
But then don't forget the other towns around here don't have very large water supplies. And most of them start restrictions, what is it, beginning of April?
May.
Mid-April?
1st of May.
Okay. And I know a lot of people in Situate and Hingham are just really upset with all the extra building and the small water supply. Okay,
There's
Jason.
Lots of brown grass as I drive around outside of Cohasset.
Yep.
If we can, I don't want to put her on the spot, but or Jim on the spot. The people for the OEA study are here. I believe he's connecting.
Yeah, Jim, Rivard, yeah, he's on.
Yeah. So, if we could take them out of order just to get them in and out, I would say if you guys are amenable to that, I would push them to the stop.
That's fine. So, Jason, go ahead. You want to take it over?
Jim, are you there?
He's on mute.
Jim, can you unmute your phone or computer?
I can keep going with what I have until he. Oh, there he is.
Okay, he's on now.
Yeah, I just wanted to check to make sure that I could get on. It was suggested that we get on about 4:15.
Sure, if that's what you want, that's fine. I just saw you come on, so I figured
Yeah,
I would let you go early if you wanted to.
Thank you very much. Yeah, someone else is going to be on with me too. So I just want to make sure I could get on. So
Awesome.
I should be all set. Thank you very much, everyone.
I will continue then.
Okay.
Okay, we're on the sewer extension.
Sewer extension. We had a kickoff meeting last week with the selectmen approved putting in for the application for MassWorks grant for the sewer extension on Route 3A, which includes water main from Sawyer Street to Pond Street replacement as well, and some sidewalks. So that grant application is in the works and is due to be presented to the selectmen at their next meeting on the 25th for their final approval and sign off. If you guys do feel that having that location be sewered and get your water main replaced, they would be looking for a letter of support if you guys did want to support that project for sewering that the 390 CJC property to help protect the water supply.
Okay, now if we don't win the grant, what does that mean? The project will not take place?
The water main and sidewalk portion of the project will not take place. I don't know what the ultimate outcome of the sewer line would be at that point in time.
But the grant would pay for the entire water line?
Yes.
Do we have any discussion about whether or not we would support a sewer line in that area?
So the reason for that sewering that property is as we have this issue with PFAS, no matter what treatment they did on site at that site, as they were looking to do either septic or groundwater discharge permit, would not remove PFAS or any other potential future contaminants that would be going into the groundwater and then therefore the French's stream, which then feeds the Lily Pond. So by sewering that parcel, it would include sewering the existing buildings as well, which is Stop and Shop and the Feng Shui Plaza, which would then take those off as being a influence source for potential contamination.
Would it also include the car dealership?
They would not be required to connect. They would be allowed to connect if they chose to, but they would not be required to connect.
See, because I think there are a lot of properties right in that area that could be potential contaminants because of where Peppermint Brook is. But if they are not required to connect, that's a horse of another color for our water supply protection. John?
I'm just wondering what the sewer commission's view on this is and who will pay for it if there's no grant money.
The sewer commission approved theoretically the connection to the sewer system with some caveats on requiring downstream monitoring and determination if the capacity of the existing infrastructure is there. The paying of the sewer line would then revert back to the owner of the property to run the sewer line. If the grant did not happen. At this point in time, the sewer commission has said they would allow the connection if the owner runs the sewer line and pays the connection fee.
That's a big number. It must be, right, to run the line, and millions, I would think.
And the owner will be paying for all the engineering up front to get us to shovel ready for the spring construction season. So the town will be doing some of the work on the sidewalk designs to finish that off, because we have the money still left over from the Avalon project, and that design has been started at this point. But the owner of the property will be doing the remaining design work on his end, not the town.
Well, I'm just curious about what type of pollution would be draining into Peppermint Brook, and we are going to be doing some testing in that area. Previously, that was done years ago, and it was stopped probably about 8 years ago. And the other question I have about that is that a car dealership with the 3-bay garage, that's a repair garage that's adjacent to Peppermint Brook, and if that has any effect on our water supply.
That one, they just put in a brand new septic system, I know. We'd have to show some level of impact from that site in order to force him to connect.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd be more concerned with what comes off of the 3-bay garage, because that's where the PFAS would come from.
Yes, but the other site is under regulatory requirements to connect. The car dealership has whether or not that change in use should have been allowed by the planning/zoning board. I can't answer that question for the garage itself, but they did put in a fully compliant Title V septic system when they replaced that building.
I'm really surprised that they did not contact us with that permit because of what they were doing. And it was the watershed. All right, do we want to send any type of letter to the selectmen indicating that we would support sewering of that area to protect our water supply or the watershed?
I would think so. If we're going to get any benefit and not have to pay any money, I would think it would be good for us, unless there's something I'm missing, like further development that could cause if this allows further development that could cause more issues for us, then I might not be so quick to write a letter.
Well, I don't know how much more development they could do in that area, and I think that the waste from the restaurant and the supermarket would be the most impact to us. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, there would be, I mean, as I say, when we were talking about the Elms Meadow, that the PFAS that's already in the ground isn't going to go away. But you won't be pushing it either by putting more load above it. So when you do, if you were to do this final project, it would be a groundwater discharge permit where they go in and they actually model how that groundwater moves. And when it gets mounded, it will get, basically when you put in a septic system, it mounds the groundwater and then it pushes out from there. If you don't have an on-site septic system at that point, you're not mounding the groundwater and pushing it. It's just slowly moving as the groundwater flows. So yes, there would be, long-term, it would be a benefit because like you said, you don't know what the next contaminant is. Like, is it gonna come out like pharmaceuticals? Is one they always talk about. So pharmaceuticals would not be removed during a normal in a normal septic system, and those would then just filter at some point into the water supply.
Yeah, because I really think because of the type of site it is and what the businesses are, it would be to our benefit.
It would also to allow for, if there was any further development there, John, that it would be sewered too. It wouldn't be, there wouldn't be new septic systems be put in there. It would be new sewer connections. So there would be a benefit there too.
Okay, I then, based on what I'm hearing, I would support us providing a letter of support in favor of the sewer connection extension.
Okay, all in favor? Or second?
I second.
Aye.
All in favor, aye, okay.
Aye.
So the grant writer is going to be writing letters, generic letters, that I will take those, punch it up for you guys, and then send it off for you guys to review.
Okay, sounds perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. GAC piloting. So the pilot equipment got here, and the actual pilot people from Calgon are going to be here tomorrow afternoon. They finally got their COVID paperwork in line and are deemed essential personnel to get here to Massachusetts and install the system and get it up and running. PFAS at Elms Meadow. I can reach out to them and ask the question as to what the cost would be to, once completed over here, bring that unit down to Elms Meadow and see what can be done at that site as well, if that's what you guys want.
Now, isn't the sodium going up there also? The sodium level?
Yes. So, and that's, as I said, so we have that issue with the sodium. So I want to look, if you see the big jump, I believe that's when you went to full-time operation at the site, from versus being a seasonal to an annual source. That gets to the question of, I was talking to you today about, Lee, is trying to get on these graphs, and I'm going to work with Fred and Jonathan and Carl on trying to make our graphing as consumable as possible by adding in gallons pumped and rainfall information. So when you're looking at a spike in sodium, what does that look like? Is what kind of a winter was it? Was it a really bad winter and we had a lot of snow and ice events that would then lead to a spike in sodium and issues like that? So when you're looking at something, we can make an intelligent decision on something and not just look at the graph and say it's trending up and not really understand what that means as far as the trend is concerned.
Okay, and didn't the sodium hydroxide add a little bit to it too?
Yes, it does. When you look at the finished water versus raw, there is a spike. So I did not graph finished, I graphed raw on that graph.
What about the salt water from the ocean? You just
So
kind of look at what
that-
you had pitched well, like what you sent us yesterday. You know, if we're going low, and the salt water table is high, can that be part of it too? I just asking.
I think given the level you're at, probably not salt water at this point. It's probably just road salt sodium. But given that history of those Pike Hole wells, which are right down the street, the other concern I would have with I don't have an issue with piloting the GAC. My question would be implementing it before we really understand what the capacity of that well field is long term. Should you be pumping it 24 hours a day, 365, or should you be pumping it seasonally and or pumping it in a seasonally, pump it 24 hours a day summertime, and then maybe 12 hours a day in the winter to let the aquifer recharge. So one thing we want to look at in the near term before we finally turn that well back on is see what was the well elevation when you shut the well off pumping, and then see how much it recharged after like a month. Did the aquifer rebound? If so, what does it look like? And also potentially maybe looking at doing some look at is there any lens underneath there, or is it strictly a freshwater aquifer there?
What about it when they salt out James Lane? I went down there one time, and it's pretty tight when they snowplow salt. I mean, that's got to get. It's right there.
It is there, and the other issue, like I was saying today, you can't not salt the hillside, and it all flows down to the meadow there. So those hills, if you didn't put salt on those hills, there'd be a lot of people in the meadow, not in the street coming down those hills.
It's where they would put the snow. You know, don't bank it against there. Put it somewhere else, or remove it. Because we know what the effect of salt and the snow can do.
Yeah. You're going to see the most of it's going to be from the route. You're going to see a ton of it from that just from the hillside rundown. I mean, that's just, that whole thing just sheds right down into that well field.
I think in 2016, there was a good spike, if I remember reading your graph.
Yeah.
15, so okay.
But yes, I'm not saying we shouldn't do something down there. I think all I'm saying is we can pilot, but then we should really look at the long-term viability of the site before we spend $1 million or something on treating PFAS if we might have an issue in the long term.
Sounds good. Okay, do you want to skip down now?
Yeah, if you guys, if
Other
Renee
people?
and Jim, you're ready, we can turn it over to you guys if you'd like.
I think we're ready, Jim.
I think we're ready.
Let me see. The only thing is, I think since it's Zoom, you might have to make me the host so I can share my screen.
Brenda, I'm going to leave that to you.
I know all of them have their own nuances, so.
See if that will work.
Yep, it should work. It should work. Sure. Yes. Okay. Share. Let me know once you guys can see my screen.
We got you.
Perfect. Let's go and just. So Jim, want to kick it off?
I will. Yes. So first of all, thank you for giving us some time to talk about our proposal to help you comply with the American Water Infrastructure Act, which is really in two separate tasks. One is a risk and resiliency assessment, which takes a look at the risks of your water system, how resilient is it? And then after that, after you complete that, you need to also complete an emergency response plan. And then we'll talk about the scope of both of those efforts, the schedule and the budget. Can you?
No. Oh, there we go.
So I don't know if you were commissioners involved with the water system back a few years ago, but after 9/11, every water system had to do what they called a vulnerability assessment. And of course, after 9/11, the focus of that was how vulnerable were water systems to potential terrorist attacks. This is similar, the risk and resiliency assessment. It also looks at a number of other things. Big focus on cybersecurity, which wasn't a major focus, after 9/11, but of course is now. The security of the system was a major focus on the vulnerability assessments, but now, of course, cybersecurity is a big issue with everything that we do, and also natural disasters. Again, this is something new that every water system is going to be required to take a look at. The schedule is based on the size of your system, and I think you're in the third group with the population between 3,300 and 50,000, and you need to complete the risk and resiliency assessment by June 30th of next year. So it definitely gives you a little bit of time to get it completed. And then after that, 6 months after that, you need to complete and submit a emergency response plan. And that is actually after the vulnerability assessment. Woodard and Curran actually did emergency response plan for the water system. So that needs to be updated, and a number of new items really need to be looked at in addition to what was looked at in the previous emergency response plan. So just a overview of the risk and resiliency assessment. Each water system is, you end up with a utility resiliency index, which is going to include some recommendations on how to improve the resiliency of the water system. And then you also go through a qualitative and quantitative analysis of mitigating those risks, and then develop some countermeasures. And the quantitative analysis, really looks at there may be components of your system that are at risk, but the impact of a failure or losing that component could be major impact, where you impact a number of your users, or it could be relatively small impact and have a pretty large cost to mitigate. And so those are some things you probably would want to put off, or maybe not mitigate those risks. But we do a complete analysis of all of that. And then again, cybersecurity is a big issue with this risk and resiliency assessment. So we'll evaluate how effective your system is, and also develop some countermeasures to improve your cybersecurity of the water system. And this is just the water system. So it's other systems have similar issues, wastewater system, but this is the only requirement right now is for all the water systems in the country.
And as kind of noted here, the orange is the assessment that is required by EPA. And really, the recommendation is doing the full scope, including the mitigation strategy and planning, since really all that's required by EPA is to open a can of worms and assess and identify a risk. It's not necessarily to identify solutions. There is some stuff in the ERP, but we do definitely recommend the whole, which is what is scoped in what the proposal includes. So kind of just an overview, high level, on kind of what that qualitative analysis includes is first step is identifying all of the assets in the water system. Then from there, we go through all the assets and identify each asset that is required to provide water. So if this asset went out of service, could you still provide water to your customers? If you can't, it's identified as a critical asset, and then that flags for more assessment. Once we go through that exercise for all the assets and have our list of critical assets, we then look at all the natural hazards and malevolent threats and identify which of those assets are subject to any of those threats, what are those threats, and look at, would the impact be significant? Would the impact be, it is critical, but, we can get it on and we have some of the measures to get everything up in place. And then that kind of gets to those critical asset threat pairs. So it would be maybe a very specific, malevolent act or a very specific natural hazard that a certain asset is very susceptible to that would have high consequence. And then from there, that's where we do that next analysis. So on that qualitative analysis, the output, there's a lot that goes into the input, but the output essentially ends up being a table like this that EPA wants that basically identifies the asset categories, whether the threat is present or absent, and if it is absent, noting why you didn't select it, so that when you have to go through this process again in 5 years, you know why you didn't select it, because you're probably not going to remember in 5 years, unfortunately. So when we go into the quantitative analysis, it basically takes those critical asset threat pairs and identifies a dollars per year risk. So if you have a high risk, it's going to be a lot of dollars per year. If it's a lower risk, when we do that analysis, it's going to show a much smaller cost. The way that this is done via an EPA calculator, we use EPA's VSAT 2.0 tool for much of the analysis for the risk and resilience assessment, because EPA has come out and said that is, if you go through the steps through our tool and you identify everything, you are going to have a compliant plan. And so it doesn't make sense to do anything different from what they are telling us to do. So consequence, threat, likelihood, and vulnerability. So consequence being, in the worst case scenario, when you had to do asset replacement, what would that cost be? Threat likelihood is a once per year, how often that threat might occur. So a 100-year flood would be, a 1%. And vulnerability is a unitless item that they have, which is really the likelihood that it would happen. And once it started, it would result in the maximum consequence. So we have a bunch of inputs for different types of asset threat pairs that go in, and we identify dollars per year risk for different scenarios. And then that kind of leads into the countermeasures, where we talk about, I'm gonna go back. So this countermeasures, we take those outputs and then are able to identify if there is any, capital project, that a smaller cost capital project, that if you did that, you wouldn't even be worried about that event happening. And especially looking at the capital cost versus the risk that it has, and running the analysis afterwards with that implemented to identify whether that risk reduces. And if it doesn't, then it's very clear that it's probably not an appropriate countermeasure. Some items we can't really mitigate with a capital project. Some items we're going to have to build that into the emergency response plan on how to just quickly react. But at least for some items, there might be an easy solution to get in there. And then that can go into a capital improvement plan. And then the cybersecurity analysis. So we use AWWA cybersecurity controls tool. This is also recommended by EPA, as if you go through this exercise, this will be compliant. And what we do as part of that is generally a workshop to gather some information. There's a questionnaire on some yes or no questions about the SCADA within the system and process control systems. And once we take those 22 questions and input them into the tool, it spits out a spreadsheet of control measures that it identifies based on our answers. And then we would run through all of those to identify, whether they've already been implemented, whether they're planned to be implemented and they have not been yet, or whether, it doesn't necessarily make sense for your utility and there's an acknowledgement that they will not be implemented. And then similarly, once we go through that analysis and identify things, there might be, some capital projects that we can easily identify. Maybe it's a network reconfiguration that's, $10,000 or $20,000 that could actually save you a significant amount of risk. So we will go through that assessment for that. And then typically when we go through the RRA, we do it in a workshop approach. So the first workshop really focusing on some of the baseline information needed to start that analysis and go through and identify our critical asset threat pairs. Second workshop being kind of going through some of those cybersecurity measures. And then that third workshop really taking all of that information and looking at possible mitigation projects, whether it's a study, whether it's a capital project, or identifying that we need to include a specific item in the emergency response plan. EPA certification, it's actually an online form that the utility would complete, identifying that it happened and that it took place. What we will know is that some of the primacy agencies, so like the state, like DEP, are checking to see whether people have contracts and or whether these exist, though you are not necessarily submitting it to EPA. They did find that they had a lot of issues with the vulnerability assessments, housing all of those confidential documents, and then one, having space for them, and then two, how to get rid of them and not having permission. So as you do the certification, they are going to ask whether or not they can destroy your copy of the vulnerability assessment that they have a copy of. But it is a certification saying that you did it, you are not submitting the plan. And then that can actually be done, when everything in the orange is done, even if we are doing the quantitative analysis and the countermeasures. However, with how long this takes, typically kind of around 4 months to get through the whole thing. If we started early in the year, that shouldn't be a problem to have the whole report done anyway by that time. And then kind of on the emergency response plan. So you guys already have one from 2014 that Woodard and Kern updated. There have been some items in AWEA that we do not currently have. They have added a couple components, these incident-specific response plans, an analysis of kind of mutual aid, and analysis of flood protection in there. So in addition to some of the other things that they require, there are some bigger efforts plus the typical update. So that's why it's a little bit more than what you probably have seen in the past for, a more standard Massachusetts update, because Massachusetts regulations don't change that much, and mostly in those situations, it's kind of capturing changes in personnel. So we go through the same stuff, update that, and then there's a bunch of new sections related to some of the OEA components. So kind of as Jim noted, the RRA is due to be certified by June 30th, 2021. There's really no motivation to certify it ahead of that, because once you certify it, it starts your 6-month clock for your ERP. So you might as well wait until the deadline, even if it is done ahead of time, just to make sure, if anything comes up in the ERP, any questions, it should, be easy enough. But, if you finish that RRA in January, but then maybe there was a little bit of gap between getting the ERP, since I know you guys might authorize them separately based on different fiscal years. So just something to keep in mind as far as the schedule there. And so we would recommend getting authorization in early January to start that first RRA to make sure there's plenty of time to meet that deadline there. And this is the budget. It was outlined in that proposal. Yes. Any questions?
Can I ask one question? Has anybody ever tried to do an MVP grant
Yes.
for doing these?
So we have had luck with getting an MVP. I think it's an action grant, not a planning grant, for the risk and resilience assessment only.
Yeah, I did.
So we
And
did do
it's
that
too
with
late. It's too
Fall
late to do that.
River.
It's too late to do that at this point because that grants are in for the year.
Yeah. So that was, I would say, and next time around, I think by the time, these are required every
It'll
5
be-
years,
it'll be
SRF
too
is
late.
eligible.
Yeah. But
So-
what about the ERP? Could we do the ERP with a MVP grant or no?
No, we tried that for Fall River. We originally went in with both the RRA and the ERP, and they said the ERP was not eligible. So we did not have luck getting the ERP funded through the MVP grant program, but we did have luck getting the RRA. But I know, unfortunately, the tough part with all of this is a lot of the funding agencies have kind of realized a little too late that they could have been helpful. And so, same thing with SRF program. SRF has come out and said that it's an SRF eligible project, but the thing is you're likely not gonna know by the time you need to really do it. And I don't know that the ERP is SRF eligible. I think it would just be the RRA. So you wouldn't know in time for the RRA. You might be able to know in time for the ERP, but PEFs are due on Friday. So, and I don't know if the ERP is eligible. I don't think we've had luck in the past getting ERPs funded. So I think they kind of count that out because I think they kind of consider it a best practice that should already be.
I have a question that's more kind of for the other commissioners. Clearly, we have to do this. I mean, it's mandated by the federal government that it's got to be done by June 30th. And certainly there's benefits to using Woodard and Kern. You're most familiar with our system. You can probably do it, therefore, most efficiently, most cost effective. And I only raise this because I think we've been criticized as a water commission improperly by people in the town saying that we have too cozy a relationship with Woodard and Curran, and that whatever Woodard and Curran asks us to pay to do over and above the contract, we just roll over and pay it. People have said to me, as much as they think there's a conflict of interest if we hire Woodard and Curran to do projects like this. I disagree with all that criticism. I think it's completely unwarranted. However, given that it's out there, and I think, Lee, you may have heard similar things in the past, do we, to protect that kind of criticism coming towards us, does it make sense for us to get other bids or proposals on this work?
Jason, are you still here?
Yes, I am here.
Yes.
Has this gone out for any type of bid or anything?
No, the last meeting I asked you guys if you wanted me to go out to bid and you said no. So I didn't.
Right, I have a question about the data cybersecurity, since we were just intensely working on that in the last few years, and remembering our person from Capital Budget, Nathan Redmond, who was working on it. I'm presuming that that would not be needing any intense study, since we should be pretty well up to date on that.
If you have an existing study that meets the requirement and you can provide that and we can confirm that, that might be a factor. But just because you've been doing work on it, it all depends on what you guys have looked at. So we may be able to confirm that based on the regulations if we saw a copy of that, but I can't say now if that would.
No, because I remember when we were doing all the SCADA work, the one thing that we did discuss a great deal was the cybersecurity. And I presume that when we had everything finished, that it was the most secure system that we could get for the time, which was what, 2 years ago when we did it?
Lee, if I could jump in here.
Yeah.
I think what was discussed Nate Redmond wanted the Cadillac of all Cadillacs for the treatment plant. And Brian Joyce, and I don't know, maybe Jason was part of this, but I know Brian Joyce said it was complete overkill at the time. That that was above and beyond what normal water treatment facilities.
Yeah, so when that happened, they had, they came in and we had the discussions with the Woodard SCADA people. And the level of encryption that he was requesting was like NASA level encryption. So we went with just the standard level of encryption. But yeah, to Lee's point, I guess I would say that if you find a hole in that SCADA system, then I want to talk to Steve Rose about it when you're done. Because it should have been, if there's some cybersecurity risk there, then I'd be curious to see how it didn't get addressed when the SCADA was implemented a year and a half ago.
And I would note that, you know, the recommendations that come out are based on AWWA best practices for all systems, and we would acknowledge, you know, what wasn't applicable for your system. But it does maybe look at some things that might not have been looked at in a pure cybersecurity SCADA standpoint. It also looks a lot at policies and how people do things. You know, who gets permission, what protocols have to happen before someone gets permission. So it's a little bit broader, but, you know, if that happened, you would do the assessment and you would identify that, you know, as far as hardware and software, that there would be very minimal risk. But you still have to go through the assessment to identify that, unfortunately.
Right. So you could have state-of-the-art hardware, but everybody has permission to get access to it, for example. And those are the kind of things that you look at, in addition to the hardware. You're right. I assume that you know, everybody is focusing on cybersecurity these days. I'm sure that that was a major focus when they, you know, either installed or upgraded the system. But again, this is just taking a more in-depth look at it, which is what they're looking for all of the water utilities to do at this point.
Is there a motion that we accept this proposal? That would be implemented over to...
I would say you should recommend just authorizing task 1 at this point in time, given the budget.
Wait, can I just back up for a minute? I mean, and it may be that I'm in left field here, but if we could get other bids and that still allow us to meet the deadline and don't delay things, why wouldn't we do that?
We can. The only reason I think you were off the call at that point, John. My biggest fear was then their numbers on the table. So I guess as long as we can keep this as a non-public document at this point in time, their bid, for the reason of it's a public record. So then, but I guess as long as we don't release it, it's fine. What that value was, that's the one caveat to that piece, is their prices on the table in a public forum, but none of their competitors are here at this point, so.
Jason, Fred, if there's a formal request for that document under FOIA, do you have any ability to not provide it?
I don't think anybody would, Fred. Like, I'm not gonna, if another engineering company did a FOIA request for a proposal, I think they would know they wouldn't get the job. I mean, not they wouldn't, but I've never seen a competitor. I've been in that field. I can't, if somebody did that, that'd be really dirty.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
That'd be dirty.
Jason, if it just throwing out, if we went out for RFP just for another consultant company, I'm gonna change my offices. My wife just rolled home with the kids, so I'm gonna be going upstairs. How much man time would it be, say, for you or the Woodard folks to walk around other engineers from other companies? Because
I'd have to basically take their proposal, take their scope of work, and make an RFP around it, because we have to make sure that the scope is equal apples to apples comparison. And then the question would be, do I shortlist and get two other quotes, so we have 3, or put it in a central register and do the whole 1,000 people may apply? That would be, if you're going to do it, I would say, please let me just do 3 quotes for the sake of not having to figure out how to do this with COVID. And
I think that'd be the way to go, Jason. And because this is engineering work, we're not required to go out to RFP on it. And so I think you're using your judgment as to who you would put on the short list, I think would be prudent here.
I can do that.
Yeah, and if you do that, and that's fine, if that's, if that's your choice to do that, just keep in mind, our scope is beyond what the minimum is, because that's, what we understood that you wanted. So, just be aware of that when you're comparing the other prices that you get.
So let me ask you one question. So at the end, if we go beyond minimum, what's it really benefit us in 4 or 5 years from now? That we're that much further ahead?
It has some pricing for you to work on some of those items that might need mitigation. So if there are some recommendations that come out of it, you have the justification to use in a funding process, that can be used, sections or excerpts for an SRF application if it's a capital project. And you also have, maybe budgetary pricing on that for a capital improvement plan.
For capital budget reasons, having a document we can hang our hat on that's not done by me or Brian or Fred, the Capital Budget Commission doesn't always agree with in-house staff on things.
So by having, just throwing it, I remember being in some of those capital meetings. I get you. So just throwing it out there. So if you guys are presenting us the appetizer menu with the dinner menu, we're going to have that much more ability to kind of work around budgets for the future and for risk assessment going forward, and something that we can build on years to come, correct?
Correct. So, and the big thing is that if you do the minimum requirements and you don't really do that, you may not know which are the bigger critical assets, threat pairs that you might want to look into. And now you just have a document that identifies all your risk with not really as much of an actionable plan to mitigate it. So that's just, a lot of clients want to, show, okay, if I'm identifying all the risk that I have, I want to show that there is a plan to do some stuff about it.
So the minimum requirement is just to identify the risks. But what we have is to help to identify ways to mitigate those risks, which.
In my perspective, the mitigation is the most important aspect.
Right.
Because if you do a study, and you only say X, but you don't present Y, as an example. To me, I've been through numerous studies in my days, and having the outcome or having the dessert menu to choose from, I think is a big asset. But I am the new person on the commission, but I rather have the other 2 folks weigh in more. But I'm more in favor of the whole menu from appetizer to dessert because it's beneficial down the road. That's just my opinion.
I agree with you, Steve.
So
that's why I asked for them to give us the whole thing and not just the basic, because I didn't think if you're going to not in for a dime, in for a dollar, but to some extent, if you get a report that says you have a bunch of issues, then we have to figure out how to solve those issues and whatnot.
So
yeah, and then of course, if you identify a risk and you don't mitigate it and something happens, then you're not in a very good position, obviously. So.
Lee, what do you think?
No, I agree with what's been said here, that it is important, especially with water, to make sure we identify and mitigate because it's so needed, and this is a good plan.
It's a good presentation, and just my background, I like the a la carte menu. That just my opinion.
Good.
Okay, well, we need a motion here of what we want to do.
I would make a motion that we get 2 more bids if we can do so without delaying this.
Jason,
Yes,
how-
we can get something out and pricing back and still get a project done by June of next year.
how long do you think it would take to get the pricing out?
I get it. I should have a price within a month and a half. Given that you're only making me get it from 2 other people. And I have a scope of work.
So we're looking at,
So like November.
maybe even October meeting, we can make a decision. Do you want to put a deadline on it of our October meeting 2 months from now to make a decision?
Yeah, that should be reasonable.
And then that would give you guys enough time to implement the plan?
Yep.
That you needed 6 months?
Correct.
Because we're in a very strange situation here with people in the town. For some reason, they don't like water. I can't understand it. They don't like to protect it. They don't
They don't
like
like it until it doesn't come anymore, and then they'll love it.
Right. Shut it off
But
and see what happens.
I do, and I do agree with with John too. Much as I love the presentation, John is right. We as a commission should do our diligence in getting obviously other prices. Again, the hometown folks would current would be the number one, obviously, but it does look better to have 2 other menus to look at as well. So I agree with John in a way on that one. So
Okay, so we'll plan for our October meeting that we're going to make a decision on which way we're going with this and hope that nothing goes wrong in between. Because let's see, Brenda, you weren't here when those 300 people didn't have the water on Memorial Day, were you?
No, I arrived shortly thereafter.
We had a slight problem in the system.
Boy.
Yes, it was called lack of maintenance.
Mhm.
Well, thank you
Not a-
so much for your time today.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Renee.
thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, we didn't make a motion, right? We have to make a motion, John, correct? On Lee? No?
No, as long as you don't make a motion to approve it, then I'll just get to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have it documented. It's basically been tabled till October.
Okay, so Jason, get to work.
Unless-
Thanks, John, for your input.
First. Okay, what about silt removal in Lily Pond? We were discussing that. Carl, remember we were talking about possibly getting the people back with the vacuum and the divers?
Yes, and the recommendation that I got several years ago was to do it as soon as the ice was off the pond so that we wouldn't be pumping weeds.
Is that something that you think we should look into possibly for next March?
I would
think-
I would agree with that. Yes. Yes, we after we did that cleaning, the manganese levels were considerably lower for at least a year. I don't know if that was the result of that cleaning, but I personally think it's worthwhile.
Does anybody have any comments about pursuing this again? John, you were here when we did it last time, weren't you? When we got the bag and we put it behind.
Yes, I was.
I think the thing that we should look into this time is seeing if we can find anyone who could use it to recycle it. And if anybody wants to know what it's like, you can go to Pine Ridge Road and see what it is. Because I think we still have some there. But yeah, and we'd be doing the same procedure, Carl, getting a bag, putting it in and letting it drain. Carl, are you still with us?
Yeah, it would be the same procedure, Lee.
Yes. Well, I think we should definitely pursue this and get someone on board to do it in March.
Well, we had already spoken to the divers when they came in to set the benthic barrier, and so, you know, it's out there.
Yep, because that's what Carl said. So if we can actually get them, because remember, we had a problem before getting them.
Yeah, as long as you book with them in advance, they're really good.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, you know, I think it was 2 days we did last time. So maybe if we do it a little bit more, I don't know. I don't remember what the time frame was.
Yeah.
But as long as it gets ordered in enough time, then we should be in good shape.
Because we have money in the budget for it.
Yep, we can put it on the sludge. Not sludge.
Milfoil.
Milfoil, rather. Yes. We can always get creative with milfoil.
Yes, because it could be right in there. We
Could be.
never. All right, expanding the in-house TOC testing sites. Jason, did he leave?
I think he lost connection.
Yeah, Jason's not with us anymore.
We don't have too many people with us anymore.
No, I think the folks at the plant, they lost connection.
I must have gone down.
Oh dear. Because Fred is going to talk to us about copper. There's Jason. Okay. Fred was going to talk about the copper sulfide in the pond.
Sorry, we all just got booted off here at the treatment plant, but I think we're back on now.
I got Jason and
Carl. How about Fred?
We all got booted off for a minute, so Fred's probably still connecting.
okay. I'm keeping an eye out.
Okay, well, you're here. Let's talk about the in-house TOC testing sites.
So we got some testing stuff coming in for some of the contaminants being phosphorus and nitrates, and the TOC, based on the cost to actually run them, sorry, Carl, the cost to actually run them for in-house, we're going to actually send those out to the lab for TOC. The cost for the testing was less realistically than running them in-house, given the amount of time it took to run those tests in the spectrometer we have.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be doing phosphorus, UV, 254, and nitrates in-house, and then looking at doing TOC out-of-house.
Okay, and they'll be monthly?
Yes.
And we'll get started with those quickly.
Yes, once those test kits come in for the other constituencies.
Okay. Fred, copper sulfide in Lily Pond, did we find any algae?
We did some original scans of like 6 species. At this point, what I would recommend is I would find a lab that can do at least 3 or 4 times that as far as looking at the species and those counts. So I'm not recommending copper sulfate at this point. I'm more looking at being able to, gather data and kind of produce a profile of those algae, those counts, what's happening, what time of the season, if at all. And then maybe revisit the actual potential for copper sulfating next season. I think I think we need to do a lot more data gathering before we decide what approach to take, so we truly understand what's happening in the raw source.
How bad is the algae out there?
Well, the 6, and I don't have it in front of me, the 6 species, those results were not bad. But they also didn't include some of what we call the real stinkers that can have reactions with chlorine and so forth, or filter cloggers, if you will. There's certain species that create a lot of problems, can wreak havoc on your filtration system as well. I don't anticipate seeing those, but it would be worthwhile to do some additional analysis, some sampling. Maybe look at not only sampling the intake structure area, but getting out there in a boat with a grab sampler that can grab at certain depths to really create a good profile of what's happening in the water as it relates to water quality.
Okay, because we really never discussed algae before.
Right. Now's the time.
Now's the time.
It's
No.
it's
What
certainly worth
exactly
looking at.
does it do in the treatment process?
What does algae do?
Yes, I mean, how does it affect everything?
It
Because
all-
we discussed it in the years I've been on here. I'm not familiar.
Well, my experience is, it will react with chlorine as an additional organic matter. So, it could affect how you dose your chemicals. There are species out there that I have some experience with that was creating filter performance issues. Not in this type of filter application. I'm referencing a pressure filter, if you will. So I was seeing problems with those. And at those sources, I did copper sulfate. Actually, at the last 2 utilities I've worked for, we've used copper sulfate as a taste and odor control as well. So we knocked out the algae. We weren't having the reactions with the chlorine at the far points of the distribution system. And it worked, or it helped reduce it. I'm very mindful of the environmental impacts it can have. And, we approached it carefully and utilized low dosages twice. So there wasn't any impact on the aquatic life. So there's a lot to consider. But I think the best course of action is to see if we can identify or create a profile of that water quality and what kind of species we can.
Okay, this is a stupid question, but would it cause dirt taste in the water?
Would it cause dirt taste?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Yeah. Well, for example, where I live, I was at the very far point of the system. And jokingly, I called a friend of mine who runs the utility. And I said, your water tastes like dirt, like it's musty, it's earthy, what's going on? And they were having algae outbreaks. So they not only treated it with copper sulfate, but they also implemented a carbon feeder system, which worked well for them. A dry carbon feed allowed them, with the way they were set up, their raw source were fed, and it went through a pipeline that was about 1.5 miles long down to their treatment plant. So it gave them a lot of contact time. So they were able to feed it right at their raw intake structure. And then it had that contact time of about 1.5 miles of 24-inch water main. And then it would hit the filter, and a lot of it was being knocked out. They also addressed it with copper sulfate as well. So there was 2 steps they took to reduce it, because it was a large system and a lot of dead end systems, a lot of old water. The water age in the far points of the system was considerable. So they had a lot of challenges. So they had to not just look at copper sulfate, but they had to look at other forms of treatment such as carbon to really.
Okay, no, the reason I'm asking is because I did notice a dirt taste in the water a couple weeks ago. Did you notice that, John?
I did not, but we have the water we drink goes through these pretty extreme filters before we drink it. It was just part of the house when we bought it, so I haven't noticed it.
Pretty typical.
So we'll be looking into that. Next is the facility study.
The data gathering is still in place, and we're giving them information per request, and still on track to have in-person review of infrastructure once the peak season's over.
Okay, so any questions on that?
No questions.
All right, but we're also still working on the lagoon. Now, does the facility study have any impact, or does the sludge lagoon have an impact on the facility study, the expansion?
The biggest thing on hold with the sludge lagoons is we still don't have a discharge permit from DEP, given the testing that was done going on a year and a half ago, or completed a year and a half ago. So we're still waiting for the results of that pond health study. And I believe Fred has talked to the guy from
Oh, so you lost them.
We lost him again. Something's going on down there.
I don't know. It looks like everybody is kind of frozen down there.
I said that
Uh-oh.
Fred.
Well, while we're waiting for them to get back, how about if we do the abatement? How many abatements do we
Yes.
have?
Yeah, because I don't know what the rules are for these Zoom meetings, but I only booked us until 5.
Aha.
I don't know if there's another meeting that comes up that will get booted. I don't know.
All right, we better talk fast.
I say do the abatement quickly.
Yes. Okay, what do we have? Just the one?
Yes, just the one. I'm sorry. I'm trying to admit people. I apologize.
Yeah, I
So-
dialed into my phone too if I need to, if I
All
go.
right, I think I got everybody. Carl, Fred, everybody seems to be in now. All right. So the abatement was for 281 North Main Street. Mrs. I don't know how to say her name.
This is Carfano?
Vano, yep.
Yep.
So she had an issue with an outside. I don't know. Did you guys read her letter? It was.
I did. I read the whole thing. And they found it on the head of the valve.
Yeah, and it could have been caused while we were doing flushing. A piece of sediment could have gotten in there when she was turning on the little spigot. The woman always, I went back to see, she always had like a couple of $100 in the till for when it came to her water bill. And she said that she was always planning for the worst, and it just happened to happen. So I think, she had like $250 or $270 in reserves, which she said, I let the town use it for whatever they want and build interest. And but she's just looking for her water bill to go back to, she's requesting it to just be everything abated to what her normal bill would normally be.
Yeah, because we're looking at 64 and taking a look at the last couple of years. She wasn't using that much. And since she is one of our senior citizens and a widow, because this is not a regular irrigation system, is it? Isn't she just using it as a faucet for attaching a hose?
She isn't physically turning on the entire sprinkler system. Her husband put the sprinkler system in before he got sick, or when he got sick, because he didn't want her toting a hose around the yard because of, he knew he was going to die. So, but
What's the amount we're looking at for the abatement?
She was billed for 6,400 cubic feet of water, which is $551.88. When her normal usage, like last year at the same time, was 6132. I mean, she uses like 600, 700, 1,200 cubic feet at the most in the summer months. I mean, if you go back to 2016, that was her highest, 2,800 cubic feet. But ever since her husband passed, it's been minimal to always under 2,000 cubic feet of water.
Has she paid the bill?
Oh yeah, it's completely paid.
No, well, she was saying she pays in advance. she pays several $100s in advance of every bill.
Yeah, so it took all of her money that she had credited, and then she paid, she's got a credit now of $7.39.
So you said,
I'm
you
not
said-
sure of her age. I don't know if she's waiting for the apocalypse. I don't know, but she always pays in advance just in case something happens.
that's a good customer right there.
Yeah. Well, I know we did Mrs. Brennick as a senior citizen and gave her a break.
Yes, we did.
So you said 600 was her average, is her average usage?
Well, I'd say probably more like 1,200.
Yeah, I think if you took
Yeah.
64
Looking at-
minus 12 and just credited the 5,200 for cubic feet,
Okay.
I think that would be fair. That would be comparable to what she used last year for the same quarter.
Well, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to abate the water bill to, you said 1,200?
Made a motion to, wait a minute, made a motion to credit 5,200 cubic feet.
Cubic feet.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so I will do the paperwork for this, and I will need somebody to sign off on it.
Okay, I am going to be gone for possibly a week. I don't know yet. We're still discussing that.
I can come down. Just let me know.
All right, I think, do we have to vote to give Steve the ability to sign off on this and warrants in case I'm gone?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, just in case, because right now it's just you having the sign off for everything. So if we can have Steve or anybody for a backup, that would be the best, I think.
I think if we make a motion that any one of us can sign, that would probably be the best, because I have to come by anyways with the minutes
Okay,
and drop those off once they're signed, so I'm happy to do it as well, Steve.
Okay.
So
Okay,
why don't we make a motion that,
Prince,
go ahead.
will you be back to doing warrant, signing off on warrants? Will you do that also?
I can do that.
Okay, because remember you said you didn't want to do it before. That's
I
why I
don't
was,
remember, I don't
Okay.
remember that.
okay, so let's make a motion that any one of us can sign off on anything.
well, I will say this, okay? Usually, other boards are doing the same thing right now during the pandemic. So, it's one person that's assigned to everything, but then, if like you, Lee, be in the chair, if you're away, then it falls on the other people.
That sounds good.
Sounds good.
Who wants to make the motion?
I'll make a motion to let any one of the commissioners to sign warrants or related articles.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, before we forget, meeting notes approval.
Yes, I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes for March 11th, 2020, the meeting minutes for February 25th, 2020, and the meeting minutes for June 9th, 2020.
Second.
The only one that can second it.
I second it.
All in
All-
favor? Aye.
All right.
So I guess the plan is, and I will bring these, Brenda, when is a good time for me to come by the
Tomorrow
office?
morning. I'm back in tomorrow morning. I have a safety meeting with the group, so I will be in there by 7, and I'll probably be there. My meeting's at 10, probably till 11.
Okay, I've got a bunch of stuff tomorrow morning, but I will come by, 'cause it's only gonna take me like 10 minutes to come through.
All you gotta do, John, you don't even have to come into the building. We put a mailbox out front of the front door.
Okay,
Kind of ghetto looking, but you just pop the things in there, and as soon as somebody comes in, we'll grab them.
okay, thank
You don't
you.
even have to come into the facility for that. Oh, but I need you to sign,
Right. All right, I'll come by and I'll come in.
all right. I'll work the numbers up now so that they're available when you come in tomorrow.
Okay,
And you can only do the lobby, John.
that's okay with me.
That's as far as we can get. Okay, I just have one more comment here. We got the final numbers on the initial PFAS for the well field. What about the secondary? Have we heard anything about that?
They haven't
No,
come
we
in
have
yet.
not. Hello?
Yes, Carl.
Yes, no, we have no numbers yet.
Okay, because the initial ones came in almost the same.
Correct. Correct,
yes.
20.4 at Elms Meadow.
Yes, that's why I'm glad we shut it down.
So that's why.
What was that, Fred?
No, that was actually Jason talking to me because he lost his connection. He's in the room I'm sitting in.
I'm here with my cell phone just in case we get dropped again.
Okay, do we have anything else we have to discuss that we missed?
We need to just discuss a letter to 390 Chief Justice Cushing High
Yes.
with a response to Jeff DeLisi.
Okay. I liked your letter, John.
Me too.
Thank you. It was Jason's letter. I just added some legalese to it, and you know, if everyone's okay with it, I added it for Lee's signature because I think it would be important to come from the chair of the commission. I don't know if they're looking, you know, they have a lawyer involved. I don't know if they're looking to go to litigation on this or not. That's always a possibility. And
Donald always has an attorney, no matter what he does.
okay. Yeah, I don't know his MO. So, you know, so I think it's just important that we make sure everything in here is accurate, which I'm confident it is. And I think there's some benefit to having it come from the chair of the commission because he's asking the water commission in his letter to respond.
Okay, I can come in tomorrow anytime before 3 o'clock to sign.
Okay, if you sign it, yeah, again, if the door's locked, leave it in the mailbox.
You can also have, if you don't want to do that, you can have Brenda sign your name and just put her initials after your signature.
All right, I'll just print it up and sign it
Yeah.
and drop it off.
Yeah,
Right?
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm attempting to take Thursday and Friday off. I'm waiting to hear from IT if they can transfer the phones back to the office without too much complication.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's supposed to be really nice weather for the next couple of days. So if we can get everything kind of bundled up tomorrow, that'd be great.
Good.
Okay, that'll be good. I'm taking off tomorrow around 3 o'clock. And I'll be up in Maine until possibly Tuesday or Wednesday. I don't know. When you're dealing with children, you never know exactly what their plans are.
Yep.
Yep. All right. About a next meeting, do you want to kind of wait until after the beginning of the month to decide, to find out what's happening with schools and whatever for you two guys?
That would be helpful for me because the two things that are up in the air are schools and sports, and that could impact things a lot.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so once you guys get some word on what the heck's going on, I'm out of the loop when it comes to that stuff. Just kind of reach out and we'll try to make it work like we did for this one.
I don't know. I think that sort of works because these days you just can't really plan that far in advance, I don't feel.
Especially with the school thing for John and I. That's going to be real tricky. And
Right. I mean, the way they're talking, splitting up the days, you know, and I don't know. I don't understand it. So,
Me either.
I don't know. What are they talking about at the high school, John? Are they?
Well, they're doing both the same thing at the middle school and high school where they're separating the classes in half. At the middle school, they're doing it by alphabet. The high school, they're doing it by grades. So the high school, for example, 10th and 11th grade is group A. I'm sorry, group B. 9th and 12th is group A. Group A will go to school in person for a week, while Group B stays home and does remote learning, and then they switch. I also heard that I was at a CEF meeting last night, and I have also heard there's rumblings that the teachers union has not yet approved this, has not signed off on it, and may not sign off on it. This is just the town's proposal.
Heard the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, what are they doing for transportation?
Only for kindergarten through 6, because that's what the state requires. Everyone else is on their own.
And they're gonna do 1 kid per row, 1 kid per seat per row. It's
Well,
gonna be. I might be hiring a full-time tutor because we both work, and you know, if let's say Matthew's home Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you know, Melissa's home part-time at South Shore, so it's gonna be pretty tough.
No, it is.
yeah, I know where my daughter is up in New Hampshire. They don't have bus transportation. They expect the parents to drive both ways. And so they're setting up a micro pod with a bunch of friends instead.
Yeah, there's been a big boom in public and private school applications because of the unknown what's going to go on with the public schools, which up to this point I think have been excellent. And they're, you know, I think the administrators are great, the superintendent, but they're dealing with a lot of things for the first time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'll work with you guys to make it work. We'll come up with some sort of a game plan.
We'll make it work.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
My arms could be slightly flexible.
All
Hey,
right.
well, great seeing Fred and Jason
See
and
you,
Carl.
You as well.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you
Yeah.
all.
And enjoy the rest of,
Lee, make a motion.
make a motion to end the meeting at, what time is it? 5:20.
I'll second that
motion.
one.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, have a good night.
Brenda, enjoy your time off. Hope you get it.
I'm trying, thanks.
Go to the beach. Enjoy it.
I'm gonna
See
try.
you guys.
All right.
Take
bye-bye.
care. Thanks, John Lee.